it gets a little bit more interesting in the sense that in the Sumerian version, it's attached to a much longer script called the Enuma Elish, which goes into describing not only why there was a great flood, possibly because there's this other planet that passes by us, but also because of the fact that it describes our cosmology in a much more intricate way than you have in the Bible. You know, the idea that, you know, God created the earth in 7 days and these things. The Sumerian version has 7 tablets of creation, where this tale is not truncated like the English version and gives you a much more elongated version of the information. They even have things like this where, again, you know, there was, in the Bible it says, man once lived amongst their living gods. There were giants upon the earth. Well, it's interesting that the Anunnaki are sometimes, or in Sumerian times, even their kings, are depicted bigger than the people. And this could just be because of their stature, or they were physically bigger. I actually haven't found any evidence of me personally that the Anunnaki, if they did exist, were giants, but probably much larger in stature than us. But where I did find the information interesting is that they talked about where these beings came from. So they depicted these beings, the Anunnaki, and said, everything we know, we learned from them. And they tell us that they came from another planet within our solar system called Nibiru. And the symbol of this planet, Nibiru, was a glowing cross. Now, keep in mind that this is, you know, 4,000 years before the time of Jesus on the cross. The Sumerians, just to put it into context, 3,800 BC. We're at 2012 now, basically 2,000 years removed from the time of Jesus. You know, BC to AD, excuse me. So if you go back another 2,000 years from that, you're at the God of Abraham, the Jewish God. Go back another 2,000 years, you're at the time of the Sumerians. So what's really interesting about their astronomical information is that they knew things beyond their time. Now, maybe not in the context of a cyclical knowledge, but at 3,800 BC, they're depicting, here's a man being taken up and being granted the modern plow, the invention of modern agriculture. But as a backdrop, we see the sun in the center, and all the planets in their correct sizes around the sun. And even something that looks like what could be a rocket, like we have today on its 2 pillars as they fall off and thing jets up into space. I'm not saying that that's what that is, but we can clearly decide that that's a solar system. So to have that information, you know, way before the time of Copernicus and Galileo and the invention of the telescope, combining that with mathematics, the Sumerians were accurately depicting our solar system, you know, 6,000 years ago. Now, what's also very interesting about that is that they said we lived on the 7th planet. You would think that it would be like the 3rd planet or the 3rd rock from the sun, like the cool TV show. But actually, if you're coming from outside our solar system in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th planet, the 7 days in a week, the sacred number 7, they called Earth the 7th planet. But in their depiction of the solar system, they included one other planet, which they called Nibiru, and we just have not located this planet yet. Modern science has been looking for something that would fit this ancient model, and they call it Planet X. X meaning 10, beyond Pluto, also unknown. And this is just an artist's rendition of the Sumerian understanding. They counted 12 planets. They counted the 9 we know of, plus our sun, our moon, and then this additional planet, Nibiru. Now, what's really interesting about the tale of Nibiru, coming out again from the research of Zecharia Sitchin, Zecharia Sitchin is one of those linguists, too, that has really suffered a lot of scrutiny because, you know, there's pretty much modern linguistics and academia has drawn a line in the dirt, and no one is willing to step over that to say that extraterrestrials exist. So in the context of Zecharia Sitchin's work, if anyone's open-minded enough to look at that line and choose to just step over it briefly and look at the information, we see that the context of what Zecharia Sitchin says spans beyond just the Sumerian culture and similarities of how ancient cultures have all kind of embraced this idea. One of the things that's very interesting about the Sumerian writings is this idea of Nibiru's initial interaction with our solar system. If the Anunnaki live on this planet, the information says that a long time ago, when our planets hadn't even finished coalescing, meaning as the Sumerian Enuma Elish writes it, they were still soft, the planets were still soft. An intruder planet comes in, gets attracted by the gravitational pull of our outer planets, and then on one of its passes, the main moon of Nibiru, or Planet X, has a collision with our primitive Earth, then called Tiamat. That collision causes our Earth to move slightly over into the orbit it's now in, and causes the asteroid belt to strew out which the Bible calls the hammered out bracelet, into the position that it's now in. If we were ever to have some type of a large event like a moon or something whacking our planet, we're talking about a very large event. And if Earth suffered such a dramatic event, it would just be half a planet. How is this possible? Well, that actually fits with our cosmological record in the sense that we all understand Pangea. At one point, we were just one land mass, and like the skin of an apple, it's kind of moved into the places that we are at now. But anyone can look at our globe and see that, oh yeah, they all kind of fit together. The land mass was actually one continent, kind of fitting, again, with the Sumerian cosmology. It's just very interesting pieces of information to come out of this. But the Sumerians say that planet X goes on, or Nibiru goes on to have this long 3,600-year orbit. It only passes around our inner solar system every 3,600 years. So this is where, again, I started to look for modern information to collaborate this ancient evidence. And there are a lot of current astronomers that have been looking for things beyond Pluto, Sedna, Quoar, Xena, and all these things. To me, they're just large ice balls. That's just my personal opinion. Nibiru, as talked about by the Sumerians, is a planet 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, a very large planet. Something of that size, our amateur astronomers have always been very astute at seeing things before the professional community. Hale-Bopp, Shoemaker-Levy 9, these were all escalated to the professional community discovered by amateurs. So anything 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, we're going to see it. Now, Zacharias Sitchin, here's the gentleman that did that 50 years of research looking into the Sumerian culture, he met with the lead naval astronomer in the late 80s, and his model, Dr. Harrington, had a model that basically explained all the orbital perturbations and weird things, why Uranus is tilted on its side, all the anomalies in our solar system, he could explain by introducing a rogue planet on an elliptical orbit. This is a 3D model, so his is extending up. Zacharias Sitchin and Nibiru, again, an elliptical orbit. In comparing notes, they found a lot of similarities to kind of, again, validate the idea that if there is this other large planet that we discover, maybe we have ancestors on it. And you can see, again, a lot of current research coming out of our recent news. A mystery revolves around the sun. Pluto has a far-out peer. Is there a 10th planet? So a lot of these questions are now being answered by new technology we have in space. Spitzer, which was recently named Surtif, or I'm sorry, I think it was Surtif, and they renamed it to Spitzer, an astronomer that just passed away recently. This is one of the best telescopes that we have in space now. What's really interesting about it is that it sits in space and it's super cooled, and it's basically able to regulate its temperature to pass through these immense dust clouds in space that Hubble and other telescopes are limited because they can't regulate their temperature and see through these things that they can't view with a visible light. But using infrared, you can see here's the visible light. Look at the amount of data that Surtif is able to pick up. These are all little tiny suns with planets around them. And so it's very interesting, again, that the amount of data that we're able to take out of our instrumentation is getting quite vast. And the idea of a planet whacking ours isn't new. Actually, about a year ago, I saw a special on the Discovery Channel called the Orpheus Theory. The Orpheus Theory states how a rogue planet whacks our primitive Earth, and in the process of doing so, the debris coalesced to make our moon. Well, that sounds pretty similar to the Sumerian story, and they're now just kind of rediscovering that. Another thing about the idea of a planet X or a Nibiru on a large 3,600-year orbit, I don't know if any of you follow the internet, but the term Planet X has kind of been taken out of context that it's going to be the next Wormwood or Armageddon or the Revelations, that in 2012 this Planet X is going to come back again and pass by us and kill us or cause another great flood. I've never been on that camp, and let me just show you a little evidence why. If we understand from the Sumerian Enuma Elish that Nibiru came in when our planets were still soft, that's meaning the beginning of our solar system. We're talking 4.7 billion years ago when our planets were just coalescing. So if Nibiru goes around our sun every 3,600 years, and it's been doing so since 4.7 billion years ago, just doing a simple math, we can see that the orbit of Nibiru divided by 4.7 billion years, Nibiru has already gone around our sun well over 1 million times. It's very possible that every time it passes by three-dimensional space, we could be here, here's the sun, Nibiru could be way over here. There might not be any actual effects, but there is enough room between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt is, for another large planet to freely be orbiting. So, again, a lot of this stuff really starts to raise questions. A lot of the things that we see on the shows like Ancient Aliens, or some of the researchers like Dr. Schock and others that go to these locations, we start to see evidence of technology being built and architecture that was used where the cutting tools and the technology just kind of defy our logic. A lot of these sites, the stones have been vitrified, simply meaning that the stones were heated to a molten state, and then they, like putty, could do what they want, cut them and shape them and poke holes through them, and then they solidify into stone. How were they able to vitrify stone? And again, we see this evidence of high technology drilling, molded pouring for connected metal, and like Lego blocks so complex that we can't quite understand what they were being used for. But, again, these laser precision drilled holes really starts to raise a lot of questions as to how they were doing this. Ancient Aliens might want to say that, it's given to them by aliens. I don't doubt that could be possible, but I am leaning more towards the idea that, again, with this lost idea of knowledge in high cycles in the Golden Age, who knows what we were capable of? And it almost seems likely, too, that in these high states of our understanding of math and science, our spirituality would probably be willing and able enough to also want to interact with other beings. So, again, a lot of this stuff just raises questions. This is some stones that were transported. Baalbek in Lebanon, there's these huge platforms, and we can see some were left in the quarry site several miles away because they were damaged. And you can see a gentleman standing there in context and how large they are. These are trilithoton stones. They're extremely large. And so what's really interesting is that, again, we have these sites all around the world, as you've been learning here at CPAK, where it's not just the architecture of the stone and the alignments being so precise. It's off-world. I mean, being able to do terrestrial alignments that date back thousands of years, meaning, this one again is showing the Orion constellation being aligned with the three pyramids at Giza at around 10,500 BC. That's, how were they able to do this? Why were they doing it? So it really is interesting to start to look at a lot of these structures, which seem to be all over the earth. And we're now just starting to go, oh, wait a minute. They're all connected. They're all singing some grand orchestra, and we're now starting to finally decipher the notes. So what I've really started to become interested in my own personal research and factor that in, and all the evidence I've been looking at with Ancient Aliens and where we visited, is putting that into the context of a cycle of time. And what's really interesting is that even the Sumerians, and going back to ideas of the Tower of Babel, and here's two different depictions of that even in color, you can see that they're ascending the mountaintop to build a rocket of some kind to ascend into the heavens. What I find interesting about this depiction, there's two suns at the top, not one. Binary orbit depicted. A lot of the ancient cultures have those artifacts, and it does mean something. So, I really think it's interesting when we look at the great year, and where I'm starting to become fascinated is trying to understand that if we're, now just starting to ascend into the silver or coming out here, going up higher, does it make more sense that in our higher ages, that's when the interactions with extraterrestrials or dimensional beings or what have you, maybe even time travel, I don't know. It just seems to make more sense that our access to technology, spirituality in these higher realms would also be a time when we would be most open to meeting other people on that plane. And, I got to give credit to Walter. Loved this video, The Great Year. It really opened my eyes to understanding that, it's not linear. And the analogy, which I'm stealing from Walter, it's that we live such a short time. And the mayfly, it lives 24 hours. And so if it's born on a cloudy day, it'll never know wind or sunshine. And I think that's just such a beautiful analogy in the sense that we too, as we're approaching the end of this Mayan calendar and a larger cycle completing, we just don't have any conception of what's going to happen because we live such a short time. But in having faith in what the ancients tell us, hey, there's some cool stuff happening, and we should all be so grateful to be around that hopefully we will start to make discoveries with our sciences, with the telescopes we're deploying, the science packages that we'll have in the next 10, 20 years are going to just be astronomically more advanced than we can even imagine. So I do find it interesting that as we do this precession of the equinox, there is information that the ancients have been very diligently recording and trying to tell us The Egyptians, this one place in Dendera, which I'm going to kind of slide into another topic here, very accurate representations of our sky, but from thousands of years ago. And you can even look at the detail in this, these carvings. It's amazing, the quality. They went to great lengths to convey this information to us. It wasn't graffiti or some made-up tale. This was sacred information. Okay, so I'm going to kind of wrap it up here, and at the end, in just a couple minutes, what I'm going to also do is I brought a couple of experiments to show you, just so you understand there's pieces of technology being discovered all the time. This one is the Antikythera mechanism. It's about 2,000 years old. It's found off the coast of Antikythera near Greece, and what's interesting is that when they cracked it open, it's more complicated. It has more inner workings than a modern-day Swiss watch, and they theorized that it was used for two purposes. As an astronomical, you could plot yourself a path to navigate in the stars, but also astrological, so you could tell, it was born in the sun and the moon aligning, and here's some information about that. So very interesting that they had these devices, and some of them, again, in Egypt, there's a place there called Dendera, and they have these reliefs on the wall where modern Egyptologists say that, these are Egyptians holding up a lotus flower. And this is a lotus flower, and these are just simply the aroma of the lotus flower coming out. No, to me this looks like a bulb, and it's even plugged into a power source. That's what it looks like to me. And if we look at all the recesses and tombs and crypts, there's never any evidence of soot on the ceiling of a flame. There's only two theories. They were using copper or bronze to somehow reflect light, or they had some low-level form of a power source, electricity. So when we look at the idea of this bulb, what I've done is I've brought a recreation in a minute here that I'll fire up for you, and if it's okay at the end, you can come up closer and take a few pictures of it. But then I'm always asked, well, if you had the bulb, what's the power source? Well, in that same time frame of around 2500 BC, we found about a dozen of these in the Baghdad area, simply calling this the Baghdad battery. I, on camera for the Discovery Channel and the History Channel, using this one right here, was able to generate 4 volts by just using some orange juice and some grape juice. So as an example, this is just a little 4-volt LED. It's a little bulb powered by 4 volts. Well, if you start to think about a power source and a light, it starts to make sense how it wouldn't have been that complicated for them to combine the two if they had access to both of them. So I think it's really interesting that we look at a lot of these pieces of technology and kind of scratch our heads and try and figure out what they were showing us. I'm going to go ahead and end my presentation there. If any of you are taking notes, there's a couple of things you can jot down of fun stuff that I've put up online or on the internet, tools and things. And I'm going to go ahead and end it here and then ask if we could turn down the house lights for a moment. I'll go ahead and light up the bulb for you. Thank you very much. Let's see how dark we can get the lights for a moment. And I know my screen's not going to help much, but so if you think about the idea that this is a plasma bulb,